The trade station of Valora Prime was louder than usual that morning. Every corridor was filled with sounds, the deep hum of power generators, the echo of hundreds of footsteps, and the chatter of dozens of alien languages blending together. Like an endless stream, once every cycle. Traders from all over the galaxy came here for interstellar bidding day. The main auction hall was a wide, bright space with a high ceiling and floating light panels. Rows of seats curved around a raised platform at the center. On that platform, one rare item after another was brought forward, a glowing crystal. That could power a city for a year, a chest of spices from the desert moons of Asvara, a water orb. From a hidden ocean planet, merchants shouted their offers. Numbers flashed across screens, hands, claws, and even metal arms lifted to make bids. Deals were made in minutes. But then the mood shifted. The auctioneer, a tall, thin alien with 4 arms and a voice that carried across the hall, announced the next lot. His tone changed, slower, heavier. Lot 17, he said, his sharp eyes scanning the crowd. Is difficult, wild, untrainable. Many have tried, all have failed. Two guards led a figure onto the stage. She was young, maybe just out of her teenage years by human standards, with deep green skin that shimmered faintly under the lights. Her hair, silver like liquid metal, was tangled and fell to her shoulders. A simple band circled her wrists, but there were no heavy chains. Even so, she stood stiffly, every muscle ready to move. Her bright amber eyes swept across the crowd. Sharp and alert, a low murmur spread through the room. Everyone recognized her species, Talrine, known for their speed, intelligence, and stubborn pride. The Talrine rarely left their own worlds willingly. She's trouble, someone whispered. Dangerous, another muttered. Not worth the credits, a third voice added. The auctioneer cleared his throat. She answers to no one. She has bitten handlers, escaped to holding cells, and refuses all commands. But perhaps someone here has the skill, or the patience, to tame her. The room fell quiet. In the far corner, sitting in one of the cheaper seats, a human named Daniel watched silently. He wasn't a trader. He wasn't here for exotic goods. He was a mechanic, a quiet man who worked alone on an old repair ship docked at the station. He had come to the auction only because he needed to buy a used plasma coil for his ship's failing engine. But when the Talrine girl stepped onto the stage, something in her eyes caught him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defeat. It was defiance. She stood there as if daring the crowd to try and claim her. The auctioneer called for the first bid. Opening at 200 credits, he announced. Silence. 200. Anyone? He tried again, his voice tightening. The Talrine girl's lips curled into the faintest, smallest smile. Not a happy smile, but one that said she knew no one would step forward. Very well, the auctioneer said. 150. Anyone? Still no movement. The girl's eyes drifted over the crowd, slow and steady, as though memorizing each face. When they reached Daniel's corner, she paused for just a second. The challenge in her gaze softened into something else, curiosity. 100 credits, the auctioneer said, a hint of frustration in his tone. Surely someone. Daniel's hand went up. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. But in the sudden stillness of the room, it was like a flare going off in the dark. Heads turned. Some people actually leaned forward in disbelief. A human? Someone muttered. Is he mad? Another asked. The auctioneer blinked. 100 credits from the human in the back. He glanced round the room, expecting someone else to jump in with a higher bid. No one did. The girl's eyes stayed on Daniel, searching him. The auctioneer tried one last time. Going once, Daniel didn't look away. Going twice, he didn't lower his hand. The auctioneer's shoulders sank. Sold. To the human. The hall filled with soft, disbelieving murmurs. Some shook their heads. Others exchanged knowing looks, as if predicting disaster. But Daniel only rose from his seat, walked to the stage, and signed the transfer papers without a word. The girl was led down from the platform toward him. The guards handed over a small data chip with her identification file. She's your problem now, one of them said with a smirk. Daniel glanced at her. "Come on," he said quietly, gesturing toward the exit. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, to the surprise of the watching guards, she stepped forward and followed him. They walked through the noisy corridors of Valora Prime's docking sector. Daniel's ship, the Wayfarer, was nothing special, a small, patched-up repair craft, with scratches along its hull. He opened the hatch and stepped inside, not once looking back to check if she was still behind him. She was inside. The ship smelled faintly of machine oil and warm metal. Tools were scattered across the workbench. A half-repaired engine core sat in the center of the workshop area. Daniel pointed toward a seat. "You can sit there," he said, moving toward the storage lockers. She didn't sit. She stood near the door, eyes scanning every corner of the room. Daniel pulled out a sealed water pouch and a wrapped nutrient bar, placing them on the workbench. "If you're hungry," he said simply. She didn't answer. Daniel didn't press. He turned back to the engine core, picking up his tools and resuming his work as if nothing unusual had happened. The hum of his small ship's systems filled the quiet. For the next several minutes, she just stood there, watching. Then, without a word, she moved closer to the workbench, her gaze fixed on the delicate wiring in his hands. Daniel noticed but said nothing. He knew better than to force a conversation. Trust was like repairing an old engine, slow work, requiring patience. Outside, the noise of the station faded as docking doors sealed. Inside the Wayfarer, there were only two people, a human, who had raised his hand when no one else dared, and a Talrine girl who had never been chosen until now, somewhere deep inside. Daniel suspected this choice would change everything. Daniel sat at his workbench, tightening a bolt on the engine casing. The hum of the Wayfarer's systems filled the room, a steady, comforting sound for him. But today, it felt different. Every time he reached for a tool, he could feel a pair of eyes on him. The Talrine girl, Lyra, though he didn't know her name yet, stood by the wall. She had not touched the food or water he'd left for her earlier. Her arms were folded, her gaze sharp and unblinking, like a wild creature deciding if the person in front of her was safe or dangerous. Daniel was used to quiet. He worked alone, traveled alone, and didn't often have passengers. Still, he found himself speaking without looking up. "You'll be more comfortable if you sit," he said. She didn't answer. He tightened another bolt. "I'm not locking you up. I'm not putting you in a cage. You can walk around." Her amber eyes narrowed. Slightly, she stayed where she was. Daniel didn't push. Instead, he stood and wiped his hands on a rag. "I have to take this ship out of here before the next docking fee," he said. "You might want to hold on to something." She tilted her head but said nothing. Daniel moved to the cockpit and sat in the pilot's chair. Through the front window, the docking bay doors of Valora Prime loomed ahead. He tapped the console, bringing the ship's thrusters online. The old engines coughed once, then settled into a steady vibration. When the Wayfarer lifted off the docking platform, the shift in gravity made Lyra take a step forward. Her hand reached for the edge of the workbench, holding it tightly as the ship turned toward the dark stretch of space beyond the station. The moment they left the station's range, Daniel set the coordinates for a quiet sector, a place where he could work on repairs without anyone bothering him. Only after the stars outside began to drift slowly by did he notice she was still standing behind him. "Sit," he said again, this time with a faint smile. "If you fall over when I make a sharp turn, it's your fault." Something flickered in her expression, the smallest hint of amusement. But she still didn't sit. Daniel sighed. "Fine, stand then." Hours passed. Daniel kept busy with his tools, fixing a faulty coolant pump. The girl stayed silent, moving only to glance at the windows or examine the shelves of spare parts. He could tell she was curious, but cautious. Finally, he placed the coolant pump back into its compartment and straightened. "I'll need more parts for that coil," he said to himself. That was when she spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet, almost uncertain, and her trade language was broken. "Why, you take me?" she asked. Daniel looked at her. "Because no one else would," he replied simply. Her brow furrowed. "You want worker, No, he said, shaking his head. I don't want a worker. I don't want property. I just couldn't leave you there. She studied him for a long moment, as if testing whether his words were true. Then she turned away, pretending to inspect the small tools on the bench. Later that evening, or whatever passed for evening in the middle of space, Daniel heated a packet of stew. The smell of warm herbs and vegetables filled the small cabin. He poured it into 2 bowls, setting one on the bench near her. This is better hot, he said. She didn't move at first, but after a minute, she stepped forward, picked up the bowl, and tasted it carefully. Her expression didn't change, but she kept eating until it was gone. Good, she said quietly when she finished. Daniel gave a short nod. Glad you think so. Over the next 2 days, the ship drifted through quiet space. Daniel worked on small repairs, and Lyra began watching him more closely. Sometimes she asked short questions about a tool or a part. Sometimes she simply stood near the bench, silently handing him the next piece he needed. One night, while Daniel was tightening a fuel valve, she said her name without looking at him, Lyra. She murmured. Daniel glanced up. Lyra, he repeated, testing the sound. I'm Daniel. She gave the smallest nod, as if the exchange of names was enough for now. On the 4th day, Daniel picked up a faint signal on the scanner, a coded transmission. It was short, sharp, and repeated twice before vanishing. He frowned. That's strange. Lyra came to stand beside him, her eyes fixed on the screen. Hunters, she said in a low voice. Daniel looked at her. Hunters. She nodded once. Follow ship. Not stop. Daniel leaned back in his chair, thinking. If she was right, someone already knew she was with him. That would explain why no one had bid for her. Not because she was untrainable, but because taking her meant taking on a very dangerous problem. He could leave her on the next station and be done with it. But as the thought crossed his mind, he glanced at her again. She stood with her shoulders squared, ready to face whatever came, and somehow that decided it for him. That night, Daniel sat in the cockpit, adjusting the ship's course. Lyra came in quietly, looking out at the stars. You have home? He asked. Her eyes stayed on the dark void outside. No, more. Daniel didn't ask for details. He could guess enough from her tone. You can stay here until we figure something out, he said. She turned to him. Why help? Daniel gave a small shrug. Because someone should. For a moment, her sharp expression softened. Then she looked away again. By the 5th day, they had settled into an unspoken rhythm. Daniel worked, Lyra watched or helped, and slowly, the space between them felt less like a wall and more like a bridge. But Daniel knew the signal on the scanner wasn't random. Whoever was out there would find them eventually, and when they did, he'd have to decide just how far he was willing to go for the choice he made in that auction hall. For now, though, the Wayfarer drifted quietly through the stars, a human and a Taurine. 2 strangers who had started to share the same small space, both wondering what would come next. The Wayfarer drifted through open space like a small leaf on a quiet river. Daniel liked it that way. No rush, no noise, just the gentle hum of his ship's old engines. But over the last few days, the peaceful feeling had begun to fade. It started with little things, a shadow on the scanner, a signal that didn't belong, a faint blip that appeared and disappeared at the edge of detection. Most pilots would have ignored it, thinking it was just a passing ship. Daniel wasn't most pilots. He noticed patterns. And now the pattern was clear. Someone was following them. He sat in the cockpit, eyes fixed on the scanner. Lyra stood beside him, arms crossed, staring at the small blinking light that represented the distant ship. They are closer, she said quietly. Daniel nodded. I see it. They will not stop. He glanced at her. How do you know? Her gaze didn't move from the scanner. Hunters never stop. They keep coming until they have what they want. Daniel leaned back in the chair, thinking, then we'll just have to make sure they don't get it. For the next few hours, Daniel adjusted their course, not straight, not predictable, but in a zigzag pattern through asteroid belts and narrow space lanes. Lyra watched closely, her eyes scanning every turn and change. You hide, she said, trying 2. Daniel replied, "But this ship isn't built for running. If they're faster, they'll catch us eventually." She tilted her head. "You have plan?" Daniel gave a faint smile. "Not yet, but I will." Life on the Wayfarer had settled into a routine. Lyra had stopped standing at the wall all day. Now she sometimes sat at the workbench, turning over spare parts in her hands or asking about the strange tools Daniel used. He answered simply, showing her how a certain wrench fit into a tight bolt, or how a scanner lens had to be cleaned carefully to read a signal. She learned quickly. One evening, as Daniel was sorting through wires, she picked up a small connector and handed it to him without him asking. "You need this next," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Not bad. You're figuring out the order." She didn't smile, but he could tell she was pleased. The next day, the scanner lit up with a stronger signal. The hunter ship was no longer just a faint blip. It was moving fast. "They've locked onto us," Daniel said. Lyra stepped closer to the console. "They will try to force landing. Or they destroy ship." Daniel looked at her carefully. "If I gave you a chance to get away, would you take it?" Her eyes narrowed. "Nowhere's safe. You know this." He nodded slowly. She was right. The moment she left his ship, she'd be caught again. "Then we do this together," he said. They went over the Wayfarer's systems. The ship wasn't built for speed or fighting. But Daniel knew every cable, every engine plate, every weak point, and every hidden strength. Humans didn't always have the best technology in the galaxy, but they were famous for one thing, making the most out of what they had. "We can't outrun them," Daniel said, "but we can outthink them." He showed Lyra the asteroid field up ahead. "If we can get in there, their big engines won't be able to maneuver well. They'll have to slow down. That gives us time to improvise." She studied the map. "Dangerous," she said. He smiled faintly. "That's what makes it work." When the hunter ship drew close enough to send a transmission, a cold voice filled the cockpit. "Human vessel Wayfarer, power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Refuse, and you will be disabled." Daniel leaned back in his chair and didn't answer. Instead, he pushed the thrusters forward, heading straight for the asteroid field. The voice came again, sharper. "You are making a mistake," Daniel finally replied. "I've made plenty. One more won't matter." Lyra's amber eyes flickered with something almost like amusement. The Wayfarer plunged into the asteroid field. Huge rocks drifted silently through the darkness, some as big as cities, others small enough to pass between like scattered pebbles. Daniel's hands moved quickly over the controls, weaving the ship through narrow gaps. The hunter ship followed, but as Daniel predicted, its size made it slow down now. Daniel muttered. He were out of the ship's limited power, shutting off lights and non-essential systems, making the Wayfarer almost vanish against the blackness of the asteroids. Then he released 3 old repair drones into space. "They follow us," Lyra said. "Exactly," Daniel replied. The drones, programmed with simple engine signatures, sped off in different directions. The hunter ship's sensors lit up with 3 moving targets instead of 1. For several tense minutes, they sat in the dark, drifting between two massive asteroids. The only sound was the soft hum of the life support system. Lyra kept her gaze fixed on the scanner. "They follow wrong one," she whispered. Daniel exhaled slowly. "Good. That gives us time." He eased the ship forward, using low thrusters, to slip away from the asteroid field's far side. Hours later, they were back in open space. The hunter ship's signal was gone, at least for now. Daniel sat back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. "That was close." Lyra looked at him. "You do not scare easy." He gave a tired smile. "I was scared. Just didn't have time to show it." She studied him for a moment longer, then said quietly, "You saved us." Daniel shook his head. "We saved us. You kept your eyes on the scanner. I couldn't have done it alone." For the first time since he met her, she smiled, small, quick, but real. That night, while the Wayfarer drifted under the quiet light of distant stars, Daniel knew something had shifted. Lyra was no longer just a passenger he had rescued. She was becoming a partner, someone who would stand beside him when trouble came. and deep down, he also knew the hunters wouldn't give up. This was only the beginning. The Wayfarer floated in the calm stretch of space between two faint stars. Daniel sat in the cockpit, going over the ship's maintenance list, while Lyra worked silently at the workbench, cleaning a set of small tools. The hum of the engines was steady again, but the air inside the ship felt heavier than before. They had escaped the hunters, but Daniel knew it was only a matter of time before they returned. "Are they going to come back?" he asked, not looking away from the console. "Yes," Lyra replied without hesitation. "They always come back." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Then I need to understand why they're after you. And don't tell me it's because you're just a Taurine. I've worked with Taurine traders before. None of them had hunter ships chasing them across half a sector." Lyra's hands paused over the tools. She didn't answer at first, as if deciding how much she was willing to say. Finally, she set the cloth down and looked at him. "I was taken 2 cycles ago," she began slowly. "My people, they fight a war with a guild, a very strong guild. Many Taurine worlds are gone now. I am last family of council." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Council? As in, your people's leaders?" She nodded once. "My family ruled 3 colonies. Hunters take me so no one can unite Taurine. Without leader, my people scatter." Daniel sat in silence for a moment, letting her words settle. It explained the determination of the hunters. It also explained the look in her eyes the first time he saw her, defiance mixed with the knowledge that she was important in ways she couldn't ignore. "So if you go back to your people," Daniel said carefully, "you could help bring them together again." Lyra's gaze hardened. "If I go back, war begins again. But if I stay here, my people die slowly." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "That's not much of a choice." They didn't talk for a while after that. Daniel went back to checking systems, and Lyra kept her hands busy with the tools. But her thoughts were far away. She could still remember her homeworld, the warm orange skies, the sound of wind through the crystal trees, the quiet evenings. With her family, it all seemed like another lifetime. She had escaped the hunters twice before, but never with help. This was different. Daniel wasn't Taurine. He wasn't trained for this kind of danger, yet he had stepped into it without hesitation. She didn't understand why. That evening, Daniel pulled up a star map on the main screen. "This," he said, pointing to a cluster of faint stars, "is the Taurine sanctuary world, right?" Lyra's eyes widened. "Yes, but no one outside. Taurine knows this place. I've been in space long enough to hear things." Daniel said with a shrug. "Old stories, bits of navigation data. You can hide a world, but you can't hide its gravity pull forever. The thing is," he zoomed in on the map, "getting there means passing through guild territory." Lyra stepped closer to the screen. "You cannot go through guild space. They will catch us." Daniel gave a half smile. "Maybe. But there's another way, long, dangerous, and filled with asteroid storms. Which means perfect for a small ship like mine." Her eyes searched his face. Why take me there?" "Because," Daniel said, leaning back in his chair, "if you're telling the truth, your people need you, and maybe, just maybe, you deserve a chance to go home." Lyra shook her head slightly, still confused. "You help me, but you gain nothing." Daniel shrugged. "Not everything is about gaining something." The next morning, they began making preparations. Daniel checked every system twice, stocked up on fuel cells, and secured the tools so nothing would fly loose if they hit turbulence. Lyra moved through the ship without needing instructions, learning how to fasten loose panels and check storage seals as they worked. Daniel noticed she was quieter than usual, not cold, but thoughtful. It was the look of someone carrying a decision too heavy for one person. 3 days into their preparations, the hunter ship returned. It appeared on the scanner without warning, much closer than before. Daniel swore under his breath and immediately powered down the lights to minimum. "They found us again," he said. Lyra's hands clenched at her sides. "They will not stop until they take me." Daniel glanced at her, his voice steady. "Then, we'll just have to make them regret trying." He engaged the Wayfarer's engines, pushing the ship into a sharp dive toward a nearby gas cloud. The hunter ship followed, but its larger frame slowed in the thick atmosphere. Daniel weaved between swirling bands of orange and blue gas, using the storm's magnetic currents to confuse their sensors. Inside the cockpit, the ship rattled as if protesting the strain. Lyra gripped the side rail, her eyes fixed on the view. Ahead. Finally, the hunter signal faded from the scanner. Daniel let out a slow breath. That buys us some time. When the Wayfarer leveled out again in open space, Lyra was still staring at him. You could have left me, she said, many times at auction, in station, now, but you did not. Daniel met her gaze. And I'm not going to. Her voice softened. Why? Daniel gave a faint smile. Because when I raised my hand that day, I made a choice. And I don't go back on choices. Lyra looked away, but he saw the small change in her expression. Not just trust, but something deeper. That night, they set the course for the long path to the sanctuary world. It would take them through asteroid storms, abandoned outposts, and narrow corridors of space where navigation was almost impossible. But it was a path the hunters wouldn't expect them to take. As Daniel programmed the route, Lyra stood beside him. If we make it, she said slowly, my people will not forget this. Daniel glanced at her. I'm not doing it to be remembered. I'm doing it because someone has to. The stars outside the window seemed to shimmer more brightly as the ship turned toward its dangerous path for the first time since they met. Lyra didn't feel like she was running. She felt like she was going home. And Daniel, though he didn't say it, knew this journey would change more than just her life. The Wayfarer slipped into the dark stretch of space where the stars seemed fewer and farther apart. This was the outer edge of the asteroid storms, a wild, unpredictable region few ships dared to cross. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, hands on the controls. His eyes moved between the front window and the navigation screen, watching the shapes of massive rocks drifting slowly in the distance. Beside him, Lyra stood with one hand resting on the back of his chair. This place, she said softly. Many ships do not come back. Daniel gave a small smile without looking away from the window. Then it's a good thing we're not like most ships. The asteroids ahead were huge, some the size of small moons, others no bigger than a cargo pod. They floated in slow, steady orbits, but every so often a smaller piece would break off, spinning wildly through the field. The danger wasn't just the rocks, it was the hidden magnetic currents that could pull a ship off course in an instant. Daniel eased the Wayfarer forward, weaving between two massive stones. The scanner lit up with readings of movement all around them. We'll have to move slow, he said. Lyra's eyes swept the rocks outside. Hunters will not follow us here. That's the idea, Daniel replied. But if they do, well, this place might give us an advantage. In our into the journey, the first asteroid storm began. From the cockpit, it looked like a sudden swarm of shadows sweeping across the field. Dozens of small rocks, moving fast, ricocheted between the larger ones. Daniel tightened his grip on the controls. Hold on, he warned. The Wayfarer darted between the flying debris, tilting and rolling as Daniel guided it through tight gaps. Every time they cleared one wave of rocks, another came rushing in. Lyra held onto the rail with both hands, her eyes never leaving the front window. You fly like you know every rock, she said. Daniel chuckled. When you've spent half your life repairing ships, you learn how to keep them from getting holes. In the first place, a sudden warning tone sounded from the console. Lyra leaned forward. What is that? Daniel's eyes narrowed. Not good. That's an engine heat spike. Too much flying. Too much dodging, Daniel corrected. We can't stop. The currents will push us into a rock, so we'll have to cool it while we move. He reached under the console, pulling out a thick cable. Lyra watched as he connected it to a small manual pump near the floor. What is that? She asked. A trick, Daniel said. Old ships like mine have cooling lines for emergency repairs. I'm going to run the heat out through the hull plating instead of the vents. Lyra tilted her head. Smart, Daniel grinned. Humans are good at making things work when they shouldn't. For the next 30 minutes, the Wayfarer crept forward through the shifting maze of rock and dust. Every now and then, Daniel would make a sharp turn, using the gravitational pull of one asteroid to slingshot around another. Lyra began to notice how he timed each move, not rushing, but never hesitating either. Then, just as the scanner began to clear, a new signal appeared. Lyra's voice was sharp. Hunters. Daniel frowned. How in the stars did they? He stopped himself. Doesn't matter. We can't outrun them. We'll have to disappear. He pushed the Wayfarer deeper into the storm, heading for a dense cluster of asteroids. The rocks here were so close together that the light from the distant stars barely reached them. Daniel cut the main engines, letting the ship drift silently into the shadows. We'll use the rocks as cover. Keep an eye on the scanner. The Hunter ship entered the field minutes later, its larger frame forcing it to move slower. From their hidden spot, Daniel and Lyra could see faint glimmers of its light sweeping across the asteroids. They searched. Lyra whispered, "Let them," Daniel replied. But hiding wouldn't last forever. The Hunter ship began sending out small probes, each one scanning the rocks and sending back data. If one got close enough, it would find them. Daniel glanced at Lyra. "We're going to move without looking like we're moving." "How?" He pointed to the drifting debris outside. "We'll match speed and rotation with one of those bigger rocks from a distance. Their sensors will think we're just another piece of space junk." It was risky. Any wrong adjustment could send them spinning into the asteroid itself, but Daniel's hands were steady. Slowly, he rotated the ship to match the giant rock beside them, then adjusted the thrusters until their movement was perfectly in sync. The Hunter probes passed by twice without stopping. 2 hours later, the Hunter ship turned and moved out of the field, heading toward clearer space. Lyra let out a slow breath. "Gone. For now," Daniel said. He brought the engines back online and carefully guided the Wayfarer out from under the shadow of the rock. "But we'll keep moving. We're not safe until we reach your sanctuary world." The rest of the journey through the storm was no easier, but with each obstacle, Lyra saw more clearly why the Hunters hadn't caught them yet. Daniel's flying wasn't just skill, it was patience, timing, and a kind of instinct that came from years of living with ships. By the time they reached the far edge of the asteroid field, the stars looked brighter again. The Wayfarer's hull carried new scratches, but it was still in one piece. Daniel checked the navigation screen. "If we keep this pace, we'll be at the outer rim of Taurine space in 3 days." Lyra's eyes softened. "You are different from other humans I meet." "Different good or different bad?" Daniel asked with a small smile. She thought for a moment. "Different good. You do not give up." Daniel didn't answer right away. He was thinking of that moment in the auction hall, the raised hand, the choice he hadn't let himself take back. "We're not done yet," he said finally, "but we're closer." They both knew the Hunters would try again, but for now, they had survived the storm together. And in the quiet that followed, Lyra began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this human wasn't just helping her go home. He might be part of the reason she could face whatever waited there. The Wayfarer emerged from the last stretch of the asteroid storm into a calmer region of space. The stars here seemed brighter, clearer, as though they were welcoming the small ship after its dangerous crossing. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair, checking the navigation screen. 2 more jumps, he said. "Then we'll be in the Taurine border zone." Lyra stood beside him, her amber eyes scanning the star map. She pointed to a faint cluster of stars near the edge of the screen. "Sanctuary World is there, hidden, guarded. Only Taurine can enter." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "And what happens if a human tries?" Her lips curved slightly. "Depends. Some are turned away. Some are thanked." Daniel chuckled softly. "Let's hope I'm in the second group." For most of the day, the Wayfarer drifted on autopilot. Saving fuel, Lyra spent her time at the workbench, checking over the tools and cleaning the engine filters the way Daniel had shown her. She worked in silence, but her movements were faster now, more confident. Daniel noticed the change. She was no longer just a passenger. She was part of the ship's rhythm. But the quiet didn't last. Near the end of the second jump, the scanner lit up with a small signal. Not a Hunter ship this time, but a beacon. Daniel frowned and slowed the ship. "That's a relay station," he said. It's Talreen. Lyra's eyes sharpened. We must stop. I send signal. To Sanctuary. Daniel hesitated. Could be risky. If the hunters are tracking Talreen frequencies, they will find us anyway, she said firmly. Better my people find us first. The relay station was small, built into the side of an asteroid. Its docking bay was narrow, just large enough for the Wayfarer to slide in. When the airlock opened, Daniel followed Lyra down the ramp. The inside of the station was quiet, dimly lit, with only a few Talreen officers moving through the corridors. Their eyes widened when they saw Lyra. One officer, tall, wearing silver-lined armor, stepped forward. It cannot be, he murmured in his own language. Lyra straightened. It is, she replied in fluent tall single quotes. Daniel couldn't understand the words, but he could feel the change in the air. Every officer in the room stopped what they were doing, their attention fixed on Lyra. They led her into a small chamber, where a holographic projector was activated. An older Talreen, wearing ceremonial robes, appeared in shimmering light. His expression shifted from disbelief to relief. Lyra, he said, his voice deep and steady. We thought you lost. I almost was, she answered. But I found help. She glanced at Daniel. The elder's eyes moved to him. A human. Daniel inclined his head politely. Name's Daniel. I'm just making sure she gets home. The elder studied him for a moment, then looked back at Lyra. If you return to us, the council can be restored. The colonies will unite again. Daniel saw Lyra's shoulders tighten. She had told him this before, that returning meant the possibility of another war. But now, hearing it from her own people, it was real. After the meeting, Lyra and Daniel were given a small room to rest while the station prepared a transport to take them to the sanctuary world. Daniel sat on the edge of the bunk, leaning forward. They're ready to put you back in charge, he said. Lyra sat across from him, hands clasped. My people need a leader. Without one, we are scattered. With one, there will be war. He studied her. And what do you want? For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she said quietly, I want my people safe. But I do not want more death. Daniel leaned back, letting out a slow breath. Then maybe the real question is, can you be a leader without becoming a weapon? Her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. If I try, will you help me? He didn't hesitate. Yes? Before they could rest, a sharp alarm echoed through the station. Red lights flashed in the corridor. A voice called over the comms in Talreen language. Urgent and fast. Lyra turned to Daniel. Hunters. They followed us. Daniel was already on his feet. Then we need to leave, now. The docking bay was chaos. Talreen officers rushing to defense posts, weapons charging, shields powering up. The elder's hologram appeared briefly in the bay, his voice firm. Go. He told Lyra, we will hold them back until you reach the sanctuary. Daniel and Lyra ran up the Wayfarer's ramp. The engines roared to life as the docking clamps released. Outside, the hunter ship's dark silhouette was already closing in, its lights cutting through the blackness. Daniel gripped the controls. Hold on. The Wayfarer shot out of the bay, weaving through the asteroid field that surrounded the station. The hunter ship fired tracking pulses, but Daniel used the asteroids for cover. Each turned so tight that the ship's panels rattled. Lyra kept her eyes on the scanner. 3 minutes to Sanctuary Gate, she said. Daniel risked a glance at her. Gate, a hidden portal. She explained quickly. Only my people know the coordinates. That gave him hope. If they could make it there, the hunters wouldn't be able to follow. But the hunter ship wasn't giving up. It launched small interceptor drones, fast and agile. Daniel swerved to avoid them, his hands moving with practiced precision. One drone clipped the hull, shaking the ship. Minor damage, Lyra reported. Checking the console. Daniel pushed the thrusters harder. We're almost there. Ahead, space shimmered faintly, like a ripple in water. As they drew closer, the ripple widened, revealing a glowing arch of light in the middle of the void. The sanctuary gate. Lyra's voice was steady. Go through. Do not slow. Daniel aimed the Wayfarer straight at the gate. The hunter ship fired one last volley, but the light of the portal swallowed the Wayfarer whole before it could hit. In an instant, The darkness of space gave way to the warm glow of a golden sky. Below them stretched a lush world, green valleys, silver rivers, and cities that shimmered like crystal under the sun. Lyra's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Home. Daniel looked at her, for the first time since they met. The fierce watchfulness in her eyes had softened completely. They descended toward the sanctuary's main landing platform, where rows of Talrine guards stood in perfect formation. At the center waited a small group in ceremonial robes, ready to welcome their lost heir. As the wayfarer touched down, Daniel knew the journey wasn't over. Not for Lyra, and not for him. The real test was about to begin. The golden light of the sanctuary world poured into the wayfarer's cockpit. As Daniel powered down the engines, for a moment, neither he nor Lyra spoke. They just sat there, taking in the sight of the sprawling city below. Tall crystal towers, rising from green valleys, their walls catching the sunlight like polished glass. This is it, Daniel said quietly. Lyra's eyes were fixed on the city. Yes, this is home. But there was no time to sit in silence. The landing platform ahead was already filling with Talrine guards in shining silver armor. At the center stood a group in ceremonial robes, their posture straight in their faces serious. Daniel guessed these were the members of the council, or what was left of it. The wayfarer settled onto the platform with the softness of hydraulics. The ramp lowered, and warm air flowed into the ship. Carrying the faint scent of flowers and distant rain, Lyra stepped forward. But before she went down the ramp, she turned to Daniel. Come with me. He hesitated. This is your moment. Your people are here for you. You brought me here, she said firmly. They should see you. Daniel gave a small smile and followed Dot as they walked down the ramp, all eyes turned toward them. The guards didn't raise their weapons, but Daniel could feel the weight of their stares. The council members stepped forward, and one of them, a tall elder with deep-set amber eyes like Lyra's, spoke first. Lyra of the council, he said, his voice carrying across the platform. We welcome you home. We thought you lost forever. I almost was, Lyra replied. But I found a human who would not let me be taken again. She glanced toward Daniel. His name is Daniel. Without him, I would not stand here today. The elder studied Daniel for a long moment, then inclined his head. Then you have our gratitude, human. They were led through the city, past streets lined with shimmering buildings and market squares full of Talrine civilians. People stopped what they were doing to watch, whispers spreading quickly through the crowd. Inside the council hall, the air was cool and still. Sunlight poured through tall windows, casting soft patterns on the marble-like floor. The council members gathered around a wide table, and Lyra stood at the center. One elder spoke. If you take your seat, the council can be whole again. But you must know, your return will bring change. The guild will not let this go unanswered. I know, Lyra said, but without unity, we will not survive at all. Another elder leaned forward. And this human? What is his place in all this? Lyra looked at Daniel, then back at the council. He is not Talrine, but he is the reason I am here. He raised his hand when no one else would. I trust him. There was a murmur among the elders. Daniel stayed silent, knowing this was Lyra's decision to make. After the council meeting, Lyra found Daniel in one of the quiet gardens that surrounded the hall. The air here was fresh, filled with the sound of water flowing through small crystal fountains. They want me to lead, she said, sitting beside him on a stone bench. You knew they would. Daniel replied. She nodded slowly. Yes, but leading means making choices that will affect every Talrine. It means I cannot disappear again. And it means I may not be able to leave here for a very long time. Daniel looked at her. Then make it count. Lead in a way that keeps them safe. That's why you came back, isn't it? Her eyes softened. Yes, and I will try. 3 days passed. Repairs were made to the wayfarer, and Daniel found himself becoming something of a curiosity among the Talrine. Some kept their distance, unsure of what to make of him. Others asked questions about human worlds, human ships, human ways of solving problems. On the 4th day, the council called for a public gathering in the main square. Thousands of Talrine stood waiting, their faces turned toward the central platform Lyra stepped forward, wearing the traditional silver and blue robes of the council. Her head held high. "My people," she began, her voice carrying across the square. "I have been gone for 2 cycles. I was taken, hunted, and nearly lost. But I stand here because someone saw me when no one else would." She turned slightly toward Daniel. "He is not Talreen. He owes us nothing, and yet he risked everything to bring me home." The crowd murmured. Lyra raised her voice again. "Let this be a reminder. Strength is not always about ships or weapons. Sometimes it is about the hand that refuses to lower, no matter the danger." Daniel felt every eye in the square turn toward him. He gave a small nod, not knowing what else to do. After the gathering, Lyra met him at the base of the platform. "You will stay?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "You don't need me here. You've got your council. Your people, I want you here," she said quietly. "Not as a guard, not as a servant, as someone I trust." Daniel looked out over the city. He had never stayed anywhere longer than a few weeks. His life had been one of movement, fixing ships, taking jobs, moving on. But now, for the first time, he felt the pull of something different. "All right," he said finally. "I'll stay for a while." Months later, the Wayfarer still sat in one of the sanctuary's docks, ready to fly if needed. Daniel had helped the Talreen improve their ship repair systems, teaching them small human tricks to get more from their engines. Lyra, now fully seated on the council, had begun negotiating with other worlds to protect her people without starting another war. One evening, as the sun dipped below the crystal towers, Lyra joined Daniel on the balcony of the workshop. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "The auction," he said. She nodded. "When no one else moved. You raised your hand." Daniel smiled faintly. "I think about it sometimes, and I still don't have a reason better than. It felt like the right thing to do." Lyra's eyes glimmered in the fading light. "Sometimes the right thing is all the reason you need." They stood there in the quiet, the city lights beginning to glow below them. Daniel knew the hunters might return someday. He knew peace was fragile. But he also knew that in this place, with these people, and with the choice he had made, he had become part of something bigger than himself. And all of it had started with a single raised hand, one he had never lowered.